You're listening to Hysteria, the podcast for people who stress ordered Panda Express before the VP debate. That was me.
That tracks.
I did that. It was good. The Panda Express near me is like a good
Panda
version
Express
of
is
Panda
delicious.
Express. It's not Chinese food. It is specifically Panda Express. It's its own thing. So let's talk a little bit about the VP debate last night, Alyssa. What are your thoughts on it? Now we're 12 hours after the debate.
Right.
People will be listening to this a good, day and a half after the debate is done. Now that you've been able to sit with it for a little bit, what are your takeaways from the debate?
I thought the debate was good for America. I actually felt like the sort of civil tone really did JD Vance dirty because we could see what he was saying. And I think that for people who were looking for actual information or who were undecided, I think that it helped. I think we could really hear what they both stood for and what they were trying to explain. And I will say I deeply enjoyed watching JD Vance trying to defend some of Trump's more batshit stuff. And if we had a drinking game for how many times he would shriek open borders, I think that we wouldn't have been able to do the podcast today. But in general, I enjoyed it.
It's interesting. I'm glad I'm talking to you about this because I had a totally different take. I was uncomfortable watching it because JD Vance is such a wriggly little twerp, and I know his type. The most exhausting person in your poli-sci class who's raising his hand to argue with the professor 2 minutes before you're supposed to be able to leave.
Yep.
That is his entire vibe. He does have, as pundits were saying, like he's got finesse. He seemed more comfortable up there. He seemed more smooth up there. But of course, pundits whose job it is to sort of whiz-bang wow people by saying a whole lot of nothing would be impressed by somebody who's adept at saying a lot of nothing. And this morning I woke up and I was like, you know what? JD Vance didn't say anything. He has no record. He has no record to defend. He has no accomplishments as a member of the Senate, which he's been a member of for less than 2 years. He has no accomplishments and no record. Tim Walz did get to speak about his record, his very successful record as a governor of a state that is a very successful state. He was able to talk about getting paid family leave going. He was able to talk about the free school meals program that got passed in the state of Minnesota. He was able to talk about the way his heart changed on gun violence and gun control. And I think that pundits are going to be impressed by somebody who seems comfortable and smooth, but voters are going to be impressed by somebody who has actual accomplishments. And Tim Walz has actual accomplishments. I also found some of the coverage of I was listening to NPR this morning, and the take on JD Vance was like, oh, he was able to say if Kamala Harris's ideas are so good, then why hasn't she done them? I think that is such
dumb.
There are 3 branches of government, my dude. Like, that is such a stupid take. And I think that point, if Kamala really wanted to get them done, she would have gotten them done. How? Explain how.
This was the downside of the civility, right? Which was that it did let JD Vance kind of put lipstick on a pig, like whereas Trump just comes off as unhinged. I do worry that for people who were not intently listening to what he said, that he made completely unhinged policies sound civil. So I would say for me personally watching it, I appreciated being able to hear him say what he said. But I think fundamentally, Tim Walz, of all the candidates on the ballot, Trump, Vance, Kamala Harris, and Tim Walz, he walked in with the highest favorability rating. And I do not think that changed when he walked out of the debate. I think that he did a great job. And I think especially like everyone's nervous the first couple of minutes, but I think JD Vance fell apart at the end. Like when they were asking him about January 6th and he's like, let's talk about the future. And it's like, okay, but you don't get to do that because everything you've said is about the past. Like you've been saying, well, Trump did this and we haven't finished this. Well, dude, my dude, as you would say, that's the past. And so you don't get to say, but January 6th, which, by the way, is the most recent past of the Trump administration. And that's the part we're going to ignore entirely.
Yeah, and I think that sort of was his mask off moment, was JD Vance's mask off moment, especially when he was trying to wriggle. He I think at that point was like, oh yeah, this is a wriggly motherfucker. And I think every single person watching has dealt with somebody trying to get out of trouble by being like, well, what we really need to be talking about is this. And it's like, no. You were asked specifically about this. Answer that question, and then we can move on to the next topic. Like, he tried to pivot from a lack of peaceful transfer of power and a lie that propelled an insurrection at the Capitol to censorship. He was worried about that was
when they're banning books left and right.
But also, like, even if the Democrats were banning books, like, I'm sorry, they're not, like, they're both very bad, but if the Democrats were the ones physically taking books out of people's hands, it would be less bad than inciting an insurrection in order to interrupt the peaceful transfer of power. And the fact that he tried to draw that false equivalency was such a misstep that it made me think of his entire debate performance in a different light. Like, looking back on it, I'm like, oh, he was just doing that constantly, but just less dramatically. And that's the style of, like, a high school debate champion who can win just by talking a lot and talking really fast.
Which is what he did.
But I think that he didn't make a case for why the Trump ticket has solutions. What he was able to do was identify problems that were really anodyne. Like, oh yeah, gun violence, it's a problem. And then he would identify an anodyne problem and then pivot to an insane take on the source of the problem.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, we agree.
Hardening doors.
Right. Guns are a problem. Oh yeah, nodding along. I agree with you there, JD. And we need better doors. What? Wait a minute. What? You said doors?
Doors.
We need a better doors? Okay. Did a door factory just give you a big donation? Like, what's going? Why is that the solution? Or, like, housing is unaffordable. Yeah, absolutely, JD. I totally agree. Well, but, like, what federal lands are we going to build plumbing hookups on, dude? Have you ever been to Escalante? That shit is in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Especially because they already want to drill for more fuel on federal lands. Where are all the federal lands?
I mean, but they're a lot of federal lands are simply just, like, not arable. Like, they're the location of really delicate ecosystems that should not be bulldozed and built on. Or, like, housing unaffordable. Yes, JD, I totally agree. It's because undocumented people are buying the houses. What? Or taking the houses, or being given the houses by some untold mechanism. What are you talking about, my dude? I don't, but he did that in a way that was relatively undetectable until the very end, where it's like, oh, you're just, okay, that's what you've been doing all along.
And also, I feel like, JD Vance, what most Americans have seen is that, and pundits for that matter, is that JD Vance is absolutely catastrophically bad on the stump. And so while people kept saying, well, Tim Walz is, like, lowering his expectations, JD Vance had been lowering his expectations for months, like, ever since Trump picked him. So the fact that he coherently spit out a lot of words, also you have to be like to the pundits who are like, he won. Did he? Because he said sentences?
No, I mean, and that's the game that he's playing. He is impressive to pundits because he has a skill set that pundits find impressive. But do voters find it impressive? And I don't buy that voters find it impressive that a person can kind of slither around the answer to direct questions. I also think, let's talk a little bit about climate. There were some questions about Hurricane Helene, which the devastation is just, like, unfathomable. We will not know the extent of it for days, weeks, months, and I don't know. It's horrible. It would not have occurred had there not been conditions that encourage extreme weather events. And extreme weather events are more likely to occur because of climate change. I think that Vance got let off the hook a little bit.
Simply by saying he likes clean air and water. But also they don't.
He likes it for himself because he's a millionaire. And he's a millionaire who's always going to be able, he thinks, always going to be able to buy a house in a place with clean air and water. The people who are stuck with the poison water and the runoff are actually like his Appalachian brethren who are forced to live in cities where their water is polluted, where the air is polluted, where people are experiencing higher rates of cancer, birth defects, issues with miscarriage and stillbirth because of pollution. JD Vance is never, ever, he thinks, going to have to worry about personally living in a place that is polluted. But the thing that Hurricane Helene shows us is that there are no there's no climate havens. There's no place to go where you're going to be protected from this. And I think that Vance is living under a delusion. And we see this time and time again with him, but people don't really hit him on it. He isn't capable of caring for people who he cannot directly, personally relate to. Like, he doesn't care. And that's pretty obvious in his answer.
The other thing I just also think is interesting that, like, the moderators didn't make the point of or anything. One of the worst hit areas is Asheville. Like, Erin, we know it's hurricane season. We know hurricanes usually come up the coast. I mean, they do come up the coast. That's how they happen. Asheville, not on the coast.
In the mountains. Asheville in the mountains.
Decidedly not on the coast. And so this idea that it's like, that this is sort of hurricanes as usual is bullshit. And if you listen to the people, which I'm sure he hasn't, who are in Asheville, they're all like, I've lived here my whole life. This has never happened. There was 20 feet of water in my house, like in the mountains.
Yeah, and I think he got off the hook by just saying a really bland sentence that everybody can agree with. Yeah, like, it was bad and it's unspeakable amounts of human tragedy. Yep. Okay, cool. But like his inability to offer literally any solutions at all. I like clean air and water. Cool, me too. How are we going to achieve that, JD? Like, no solutions, no ideas. I do want to say Crooked, Vote Save America Action and Crooked Ideas have set up a fundraiser to support on-the-ground efforts, including World Central Kitchen, Organizing Resilience, AmeriCares Foundation, and more. You can just go to votesaveamerica.com/Helene, Helene, and you can make a donation to those groups who are getting aid to the people who really need it. That's votesaveamerica.com/Helene. And we'll put that in show notes, too, so everyone can do that. Okay, let's pivot to abortion.
Yeah.
Alyssa, I'm going to say the low point of the debate, in addition to that weird question about China.
What on earth?
I was like, I mean, I don't like to complain about the moderators. I think they were trying to do something, but I don't know what it was that they were trying to do. Mm-hmm. It's like, anyway, that was a weird question. And the abortion question, them parroting obvious Republican disinformation was egregious.
We texted the second it came out of their mouths.
Yeah. Walz was asked to respond to a false assertion from Trump that the Minnesota governor supports abortion in the 9th month. And and rather than just being like, this is ridiculous, which I would have been like, what on earth are you asking me this stupid question for? He brought up personal stories of women who faced health crises or died due to state abortion bans. And he pointed out that in Minnesota, they restored Roe v. Wade. Now, here's what I wish he would have said. People don't know that Roe v. Wade means up to the point of fetal viability, a person can have an abortion. Past the point of fetal viability, there are still reasons that a person can have an abortion, but they need to be serious medical issues. I wish he would have just specified that. Like, right. There's no world in which Minnesota allows somebody 8 months pregnant with an otherwise healthy fetus to
and no health problems, like
to terminate that pregnancy. And also, no doctor would do that. Can we?
Honestly, it is an absurd argument they continue to be allowed to make.
Yeah, and also, another thing that's bothering me a little bit is the discourse around Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. Right now, the fact-checking line is that Project 2025 does not create a registry of pregnancies, but it fucking does.
It does.
It does. Like, it literally does. There's a book, there's a printout, it is a public, it's written. It literally does. What did you make of Vance trying to kind of pivot around his zealotry around abortion?
He's like, well, look, this is the dance they've been doing for months because they have a rabid base that is so anti-reproductive freedom, but the rest of America is for reproductive freedom. So he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He does not believe in reproductive freedom. He will have a federal registry that is monitoring pregnancies. And therefore, I mean, look, Erin, how many stories have we read, reported out, thoroughly researched about women who were in hospitals that had miscarriages and the police were called? Like, JD.
It literally happened in Ohio. In his home state of Ohio.
He doesn't care because what he believes is better than what is actually best for the health of half of Americans.
Yeah. He also made this point that is objectively insane and we should not let it pass. He was like, listen, guys, you know, everyone can agree that it's best left to the state legislatures. What the fuck, man? You think that a person's healthcare decisions are best left to a body of elected officials who will vote on it, despite having not met all the people whose bodily autonomy they are voting on? That is so weird.
Here's the other issue. This is the other issue, and it is exemplified in so much of what's going on around the country. Legislators, you know, Trump says one thing, legislators hear him, they get together, they pass a law, the law gets overturned, but then the law, that gets challenged. So what they have done and what he seems to think is okay is letting women live in a perpetual state of chaos where they have, Erin, you have to be so glued to social media, to the news, to understand in so many states in this country what limbo your healthcare is in, that is what is so totally fucking disingenuous about his argument, because it can be every 2 years you could have a different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I mean, in Georgia, things changed overnight this week. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But like in Georgia, which previously had a 6-week ban, now suddenly they can get them up to 22 weeks.
Right.
And it's like, I'm not complaining about that, like good for Georgia. But you're right about the whiplash.
But that's the thing. It's them changing it now. It will be challenged, right? We don't know when, we don't know how. It will be challenged. So if you are a pregnant person right now that you want to be pregnant, or if you are pregnant and you don't want to be pregnant right now, that helps you. If you're someone who's thinking about what you want your life to look like in 2 or 3 years, what do you base your safety on? Like, what do you base your rights on?
I also have to say, you were privy to this when it was going on, Alyssa, but during my last pregnancy, there was a period of several months where I was going in every week because they had seen what they thought was a catastrophic heart defect. And they had to go and monitor it, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And there was a point where the doctor brought up the possibility of termination. And I was like, it was post viability. It was like 26 weeks when they found what they thought they found. She ended up being fine. Like whatever issue was, she's totally fine. She's great. But that was something that when it was happening, I was like, I live in California, a state where if I needed to, for like humanitarian, like humane reasons, end a pregnancy that where the baby would be totally like non-viable or die right away. Like, imagine, I tried to kind of distance myself from the stress of the thought, but I tried to put myself in like, what if I were in Texas, like the added stress of not only being like the uncertainty of the health of my baby that I really very much wanted, it combined with like a bunch of people who've never met me, who don't know my situation, who don't have any attachment whatsoever to me or this baby that I'm carrying, like telling me that I have to like get on an airplane, go through that, go get in a hotel. Like all of that shit is just, it is horrible. It's so fucking inhumane. And it is asinine from just a planning perspective. If you're just trying to be like bloodlessly like, okay, what's the best way for everyone to have like access to the healthcare that they need? Well, they could just go, what? No, every single state has a different set of rules. It's so stupid. Like it is unbelievably stupid. And I went off on a tangent, but it's not just like elective abortions are completely moral and fine and none of my fucking business. But a lot of abortions take place because of things that are completely devastating to women and to families. And it is so gross that JD Vance thinks it's appropriate that a state could decide via committee that a woman shouldn't have access to freedom just because they don't feel like it, just because they don't feel like she should have access to that. Like, it is so, it's inhumane. It is unfeeling. It is stupid. It is objectively a stupid way to go about it. Vance said that he had a friend that told him that she was going to have an abortion, and I'm just going to call bullshit on that. No, you didn't.
Who would ever tell him? He is like the world's biggest narc on this issue. No one told him. No one told him.
Absolutely not. No. I want to talk a little bit about family leave, which, again, Vance did that thing where he was like, people need more options. And everyone's like, yay. But
he was like voucher programming the paid family leave issue.
Exactly. The note behind the note is that what he really thinks is going to get people past over the hump of whether or not to have kids is whether or not they can send their kid to private school. That is like
church daycare.
Or church daycare for free or on the state dime. The Trump campaign's line is that Kamala Harris had 3.5 years to change the way, the conditions in which families live in this country. I just want to point out that the Build Back Better plan, as it was originally written, contained generous, incredible, revolutionary changes. It contained grants to help pay child care providers, the Republicans and Manchin allowed to expire. It contained a universal paid family leave program. It contained universal, I think, pre-K or daycare.
I think pre-K,
Pre-K. It was an incredible package for families. Did Vance vote for it?
No. And Erin, he keeps saying things like, I think there's a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about the issue. Really? Because all you do is fucking talk about immigration. And there was a bipartisan solution about 6 months ago on that. And you all didn't support it, even though like an actual Republican sort of helped write it. Mm-hmm. So don't fucking peddle that bullshit either.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is what the GOP loves to do. They love to scream and throw a fit and demand a compromise. And Democrats are like, okay, we'll compromise with you. Like the ACA was originally written by the Heritage Foundation, if you can believe it or not. I mean, not the actual ACA, but the inspiration for it was written by the Heritage Foundation. Because universal health care was just completely abhorrent to proponents of private industry and profiteering on health care. So Democrats were like, okay, cool. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll do something like that so everyone can get insurance. And now they're acting like they're screaming bloody murder that the ACA exists, and they think that it's a bad idea.
You know what my favorite part was on that exchange? When Vance got so antsy, and he's like, Donald Trump saved the Affordable Care Act.
Actually, my God.
My boy, John McCain saved the Affordable Care Act.
Saved the Affordable Care Act. Nancy Pelosi birthed that thing.
Correct.
She was sleeves rolled up, like pulling that thing out. Like, and John McCain saved that. Yes, absolutely.
So get out of here. Like that, I was alone in the living room. I just like laughed out loud at that one.
It was such a falsehood, such a blatant falsehood. I think that also exposes a weakness of the format of a debate because the role of the vice president, the job of the vice president is not to win debates. The job of the vice president is to actually serve as the backup president in case something happens.
God forbid.
But also an important role of the vice president is to be a messenger and to communicate important priorities of the American people to help craft legislation and policy. And this isn't necessarily a good way to learn what they're going to do because it reminded me a little bit of like the Brett Kavanaugh or the Amy Coney Barrett confirmation hearings. Like there is no consequence for just going up there and lying your face off and saying whatever you need to say to get through to the next stage because there's not going to be like the truth police aren't going to show up and be like, well, JD, you actually said you wanted to make it easier for people to have kids.
That was one funny part of the debate when I think it was Margaret Brennan was like, actually, JD, the Haitian migrants in Ohio are legal. And he's like, I didn't think there'd be fact checking.
I know. That was like another mask off moment for him. He is a twerpy little narc. And he's like, you're breaking the rules.
And it was like, oh my God, that's your state. Did you hear what you just said? He did, though. He did hear what he said.
Yeah. It was really, I think that the debates without fact checking are kind of useless.
Totally. And look, like last night, it was whatever time my time was, like 10:30, and they're like, we'll be back. And I was like, oh my God, this is going on. But I do think years and years ago, they used to break the debates up by topic. You know, like there would be a foreign policy debate. There would be a domestic policy debate. I do think like last night, that was the thing that was a little frustrating. Just when they were like getting into like real differences, they were like, well, we need to get on to the next topic because we have so much to cover. And it's like, I don't know, maybe you need to cover less. Like do a climate change. Honestly, the world right now would benefit from a climate change debate.
100%. But I don't know that a Republican
would agree to it. Why would they?
Would agree to do that. I mean, just for the same reasons I wouldn't agree to a unicorns debate. Like they don't think it's real. But
right.
Then again, you know, it would be like if I were currently being stabbed by a unicorn and refused to participate in a unicorns debate because I'm like, it's not real. I'm not getting stabbed.
Get out of here. Fuck this.
I think that the pundit take is that Vance won because he was more pundity. I think that I don't think that any damage was done by either side.
None whatsoever. Then I don't think the needle was moved at all. I still think that people maybe come out and they're like, oh, JD Vance can speak faster than I thought, you know? But I think that Tim Walz, like the thing that I always think comes through is authenticity. I think it is so incredibly rare you ever see it in a debate because people are prepped to fuck and then they just spit out lines. And the thing that I did appreciate is like you straight up saw Tim Walz thinking. You know what I mean? You could literally, he was taking notes and he was responding in kind. And I just, I was like real proud of him. That is, you know, especially because like that day, all the cable networks were playing like the interviews of people who had moderated his debates before and basically said how much he sucked. And so I was like, oh, I thought he fucking killed it. He did great.
And I also want to point out that even if it had been like a really decisive victory or embarrassment, Donald Trump cannot stand to not be the center of attention for even a moment, even if it serves him well. So I'm sure he's going to be yapping, doing wild shit, standing in a photo op behind a, oh good. Can't wait until we're done with this so I can see what yaps he has yapped. You know, oh God, a month out. We're a month out.
A month out.
I also want to say, you know, speaking of Donald Trump yapping, haven't really heard him talk about the IVF thing since he just promised that he was going to cover IVF 100%.
He's like, I'm on it. I got it. And then he's just like, I hope this never comes up again. Except, you know what? Gavin Newsom won't let him get away with that.
Gavin Newsom signed a bill over the weekend that would require insurance companies to cover IVF treatments for Californians. So the bill expands IVF inclusion for LGBTQ plus families by changing the definition of infertility for insurance purposes to be a person's inability to reproduce either as an individual or with their partner without medical intervention.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what I think's so funny about this?
What?
Okay. So if you are New York State, if you're a blue state, you're like, you know what? This is the right thing to do. We're going to try and figure it out. Even if we can't cover it all the way, like we're going to try and figure it out. So like, what do you think this does to like, if you're deciding whether to live in a red state or a blue state, I just think it's really funny that this could like displace populations across the country from people who are like, you know what? It just seems safer and like better for me over there.
Yeah, well, good luck finding an apartment because it's expensive.
It's like
my first apartment when I moved to LA in 2018, I just like was just out of curiosity, looked at my old building, double the price now, double what I was paying.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is really not. It's not affordable, guys. It's not affordable to live here. You might find some deals in the Inland Empire, though. Okay. Let's talk before we take a quick break about the Georgia abortion ruling. Alyssa, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So, Erin, a little bit of good news. We talked about it earlier. On Monday, a Georgia judge struck down the state's 6-week abortion ban that had gone into effect directly after Roe was overturned. So, As we said, this is temporary win because the issue is likely going to go on to the state Supreme Court, but for now, a win nonetheless. The case was decided by Judge Robert C.I. McBurney of Fulton County Superior Court. And Erin, should we just do 2 quick dramatic readings of the decision?
Sure. Can we just say that McBurney is a great last name for somebody he has so many McBurns in this decision.
It is okay. So I think here's my favorite. My favorite is a review of our higher court's interpretations of liberty demonstrates that liberty in Georgia includes in its meaning, in its protections, and in its bundle of rights, the power of a woman to control her own body, to decide what happens to it and in it, and to reject state interference with her healthcare choices. That power is not, however, unlimited. When a fetus growing inside a woman reaches viability, when society can assume care and responsibility for that separate life, then and only then may society intervene.
Love that. That's a McBurney.
Love that.
That's McBurney. And he also had some choice words for originalism, which is a very stupid way to interpret laws. But anyway, he said, the meaning of the Constitution is no more fixed than the composition of the majority in the highest courts in the land, especially when formerly bedrock principles such as stare decisis appear to be on the wane. Given that less majestic but undeniable reality, the more logical approach to assessing whether a legislative enactment is void at the time of its passage is to rely on the then controlling constitutional interpretations. Otherwise, ghost laws from years or decades past, enacted by legislators long since voted out of office, can spring to life when our ever-changing politics yields a new majority on our high courts, a majority which in turn imparts a new meaning to supposedly unchanged and unchanging Constitution. But here we are. Take that, Sam Alito. McBurned. I also want to point out that McBurney is a Republican appointee.
Yep. Yes, very important.
I was like, I got to the end of the ruling and I was like, Robert McBurney? And then I Googled it and I was like, he's white. And then I kept reading and I was like, and appointed by a Republican. That is wild. Well, Mr. McBurney, Judge McBurney, you are welcome on Hysteria. You can be...
Anytime.
Anytime. You can be a guest.
You can just come read your opinions. We'll listen.
That'd be fine. That's a McBurney, we'll call it.